G'day, Jason the Middle-Aged Gear Junkie here. I've got a bit of a different video today. We're going to look at the evolution or progression over the years of the Boss PH phases. But before we get into that, if you haven't already, please subscribe. It really does help this channel out. And if you want to support this channel, you can always buy some merchandise from the Middle-Aged Gear Junkie store, and I've left a link in the description. When Boss released its compact series of pedals in 1977, they initially released 3 pedals. They released the SP-1 Spectrum, which was a one-band parametric EQ. They released the OD-1 Overdrive, which could possibly be one of the first, if not the first, overdrive pedal in mass production, and the PH-1 phaser. Now, phaser was a very popular effect during the 70s. It was probably the modulation effect of choice, in fact. So it wasn't that surprising that a phaser was one of the first pedals that they attempted. Now, Boss pedals of this period, 77 through to about 80, most of them came out using 2 knobs or 2 knobs and a switch. We had, for example, the CE2 and the slow gear, all had the 2-knob design. And in 77, they brought out a pedal that had a 3-knob design, which would become the norm a few years later. These earlier models, up until about the end of 1980, had a silver thumb screw. So the black screw that we've become accustomed to over the years came in at about 1981. So if you find one with a silver screw, you know that, well, it's a good indicator that it's an older version of that pedal. This particular one also has the larger font here for the model name, the PH-1. We call that long dash. So I have a picture here of, I have 2 CE2s. One of them's from 1985. The other one is from 1980. And you can see the longer dash on the 1981. Also, these really early Boss pedals didn't have serial numbers, they had batch numbers. So they had a 4-digit number on the inside. This one has the number 0000, which when I decoded it said that it was made in November of 1980. And a couple of months later, I bought this CE2, and funnily enough, it had the exact same batch number. So these 2 pedals were probably made in the same batch and both shipped off to Australia. But enough talk, let's hear what it sounds like. Here's my clean sound. I'm using my P90 loaded Les Paul. For consistency's sake, I'm using just the bridge pickup for the entirety of the demo. There's a little bit of reverb from the amp, but this is what it sounds like. And the PH-1. So classic phaser sounds very much in the vein of a Phase 90. If you saw my What's the Difference Between Phasers and Univibes episode that I did, I discovered when I played them back to back that this and the Phase 90 were very similar, just that this one allowed you to adjust the depth, which the Phase 90 doesn't. I like my depth fairly high with phasers because I really want to hear that effect. Slower rate. It's just a classic 70s style phaser. While I like the PH-1 phaser, I wouldn't say that it stood out or was unique in any way really at the time of its release. There were a lot of great phasers that came out in the 70s, and this was just another one on that list. In fact, the only reason I bought this particular one is that it's in absolutely mint condition, and I got it for less than half of what you would expect to pay for one like that. So if I didn't get it really cheap, I wouldn't have bought it. In the early 80s, Boss started to produce more pedals that used the 3-knob layout that they'd used for the DS1 in the 70s. So most of the new pedals coming out were starting to go this way. We had the SD1, which came out in 1981. We have the CS2, and many other pedals coming out around this time used the 3-knob layout. Now, rather than come up with a whole new design, Boss decided to modify the PH-1, and they brought out this, the PH-1r. Now, the R, well, I've heard a few different theories as to what it stands for. Some people think it stands for revision. Some people think it stands for resonance, which is this control here that the original PH-1 didn't have. What the resonance control here does is that it feeds back part of the signal into itself. Now, if this sounds familiar, that's because flangers do this. This is the main difference between a flanger and a chorus pedal. Now, this feeds back part of the signal and it sort of rephases it, and it gives it a really interesting sort of sound. And the cool thing about this particular one, the PH-1r, is that if you turn the resonance all the way down, it's exactly the same as a PH-1. So if you don't want that, or if you want to get those PH-1 sounds, turn that all the way down. Once you start to introduce that, you start to add a new character to this pedal that the PH-1 couldn't produce. And in my opinion, I think it sounds a lot better. I think it's a lot more interesting. So here's the PH-1r. I've got the resonance all the way down to see if it sounds like the PH-1. Yeah, pretty much. Now, as I wind up the resonance here, it's going to give me a more interesting phaser sound that the PH-1 couldn't do. It's such an interesting sound. I love it. I'll try turning up the rate. Might turn the depth down and the resonance up and see if that does anything. Gives a sort of a frequency notch sort of thing. Like a parked wah sort of thing. I don't really like it. Beautiful pedal. So I'm a huge fan of the Boss PH-1r. I think just making that one little revision to this pedal and adding that resonance control really changes what this is capable of, and gives it such a much more interesting flavour than the PH-1. These crossed over for about a year, so this came out in 1980, this went extinct in 1981. Because it was made in 1980, the very first year of production, we see the silver screw on them. So if you find one with a silver screw, they are worth more in terms of dollars. This one here's a 1982 version. It's in very good condition. Now, a couple of years ago in a video, I said that these were affordable. They're not anymore. If you were to look them up online, the prices for these in recent years have gone up almost double in the last 2 years. So I think people are really starting getting onto the fact that these are a great pedal, and you need to get your hands on one at some stage. I refer to the period between 77 and 82 as the first phase of Boss, where most of the pedals coming out used either the 2 or 3 knob layout. There were some exceptions, But then in 1983, Boss introduced two pedals that use this layout here. Now this one is missing a knob. This is the DD2, and the other pedal that came out that year was the HM2 Heavy Metal. They both had 4 knobs, and they both used this coloured knob scheme. Now, most Boss pedals over the next 10 years would have this kind of design, where we'd have 3 controls and a mode selector. Some of them had just had 4 controls all up, but most of them would have a mode selector. Some of them, like this, the OD2, this was brought in to replace the OD1. But there were other pedals, for example, the DSD2 and the other 2 that I just showed you. These were the first of their generation of pedals, but they've both got the numeral 2. So I refer to this period between 83 and 93 as the second phase of Boss. So in this new phase, Boss started to bring its older pedals like this, the old OD1, into line with its new design. So that was replaced with this, the OD2. Now this was no different with its phases. So in 1984, Boss released the PH-2 superphaser. This replaced the PH-1r, which went out of production a year after this one was released. Now, super was a buzzword that was used a lot in this period, as was turbo, a bit like in the 90s, how people used the word hyper or mega or extreme, or in the 2000s when people would put a lowercase I in front of something to make it cool. This was different to both the PH-1 and the PH-1r. They were 4-stage phases, which was really the common benchmark amongst phases from the 70s. This one here has 2 modes. Mode 1 is a 10-stage phaser, and mode 2 is a 12-stage phaser, and it actually reduces the amount of your dry signal so it sounds even more accentuated. It has the resonance knob, just like the PH-1r, but it does not sound like either of the 2 pedals that came before it. So we'll start off in mode 1. My usual setting for this pedal is depth all the way up, resonance a bit off center, and rate somewhere near the middle. It almost sounds like it's got a delay on it because of that resonance feeding back the signal into itself. It doesn't happen instantly, so it's almost like a second wave of the phasing. And I love that sound. I think it's amazing. Sounds absolutely lovely. If I switch it over to mode 2, it's like they kill more of the dry signal and it becomes a bit more pronounced and gives it also a larger sweep. Because it's got a larger sweep, it is also capable of going slower than mode 1. And that's how Mike Einzinger got the tone for the song Vitamin. Because mode 2 has more ground to cover, it can go slower, but it can't go as fast as mode 1. So mode 1 is quicker, It's less pronounced. I really love mode 1. I just, yeah. With those controls set up like that, I think they sound great. Without the resonance at all. Not quite the same as the PH-1 because it's got more stages than the PH-1. Yeah, it really is its own beast, this one. It's different from both the PH-1 and the 1R. Now the PH-2 here is one of my favourite modulation pedals of any kind. If I'm building a desert island pedal board, I would find it very difficult to leave this off. I just absolutely love it. I don't think really any other phaser that I've tried sounds quite like it. It's used by one of my guitar heroes, and this was in production from 1984 until 2001. I regard the period from 92 through to 99 as the third period of Boss development. And I think that from 2000 onwards, we start to see a fourth period of Boss development. And I think it starts with this pedal here. This is the Boss PH-3 phaser. Now, this is Boss's first digital phaser. The Super Phaser was put out of production a year after this was brought in. And we start to see over the next 10 years, from 2000 through to 2009, 2010, most Boss pedals become digital. Even some staples that had been around for a few years, like the CH1 chorus and the CE5 chorus, they were originally analog. They're now made digitally. Basically, they released very, very few analog pedals in this time. Even a lot of drive pedals that were coming out were digital. Now, I'm not sure if you can tell through the video audio, this pedal is known for being a bit of a tone-sucking thing, and I would probably have to agree with that. Now, I mean, I realise that when you plug in a phaser, you're going to transform your tone fairly drastically anyway, but you can definitely hear a bit of a volume drop and, you know, a loss of top end and things like that. So, yeah, that is probably a disadvantage that the PH-3 does have. Let me know if you disagree with that. So the first thing I'm going to examine with this pedal is how it is different from all of the others. Now, we have a multiple mode switch here. So I'll just go through each one of those modes. So we have 4, 8, 10, 12 stages. We have rise and fall and step. Now, the rise and fall, the way they work is so the fall will start at the top of the sweep and go down, and then instead of sweeping back up again, it will just go directly back to the top. So it'll go like this. And the rise will do the exact opposite, so like that. Sorry for the demonstration. And the step one, well, it's kind of like an arpeggiated thing, which is really interesting and cool, but I have never ever been able to use it to write something, which is pretty odd for me because I can usually do that. But anyway, let's go through the modes. it's pretty, it's interesting. Like I said, I've never been able to find a use for that sound though, unfortunately. Another aspect of this pedal that's really useful is tap tempo. So if I hold down, I'm just going to go back to 4-stage mode. Now, if I hold down this, the light will go green, and then I can tap in the tempo using the foot switch. So that's pretty cool. It also has an expression pedal input there, which you can use to get some pretty crazy tones as well, which is really cool. Technically speaking, I should be able to make this PH-3 sound like all of the other pedals that I've already demonstrated. So I'm going to try doing that right now. So to try and emulate the PH-1, I have to turn the resonance all the way down. I'm going to turn the depth to about the same, and the rate there was halfway up, and I've got it set to 4-stage mode. So technically speaking now, that should sound the same as the PH-1 here. So here's the PH-1. And that's where I really start to notice the tone suck even more. I think this preserves, the PH-1 here preserves my tone more than the PH-3. I think the PH-3 has a deeper effect, but this definitely preserves my tone more. Now let's try the PH-1r. So for the PH-3 to sound the same, we've just got to turn the resonance up. So. You'll notice I just turned the rate down a little bit on that because it was a little bit faster than the 1R. Just because they both have a rate knob does not mean that they're set the same. That's a lot louder too. Yeah, there's a huge difference between these two in output, that's for sure. Here's the PH-2. So that's in mode 1. So to sound like the PH-2, I've got the knob set pretty much the same. Now put it up to 10-stage mode. So we've got 4, 8, 10. 10-stage mode. Yeah, that's definitely similar. I'd certainly give it a pass mark. All right, let's try mode 2. So here's our reference. Mode 1 on both of these certainly sounded similar, but mode 2 sounds very different. This is way more accentuated and pronounced, more robotic sounding. This one just sounds watered down. Is probably the best word I can use for it. Now, digital has its benefits and it also has its drawbacks. A few of the benefits, for example, tap tempo, that's a really cool function, as is the expression pedal jack there. I think 3 of the modes there, the rise, the fall, and the step, I doubt that they would be able to do that using analog circuitry. So, these are really cool functions. But the drawbacks for me outweigh the benefits. Now, the drawbacks are this really is a tone-sucking pedal. And I'm not saying that all digital pedals are like that, because they're not. But this one definitely does not preserve my guitar tone in the way that the others do. It loses a bit of top end or sort of higher mid frequencies that make the guitar more present. This seems to cut that back. It also seems to dip in volume. So they're 2 of the drawbacks which make me probably, out of all the pedals that I've shown, this is the one I like the least. The functionality is great, but I would rather have a pedal that does 1 or 2 things really, really well than one that does heaps of things mediocre. To this point, it's been 22 years since Boss have brought out a phaser pedal, which sort of begs the question, should they bring out a new phaser? I think they should. I think digital technology has progressed so much in that 22 years, I think they could produce a better digital phaser at least, but I would actually like to see them go back to making an analog one or an analog digital hybrid phaser. I think that'd be really, really interesting. There's also a lot of people out there who believe that they should make a Wazacraft phaser, and if they did, my idea behind that would be to make a PH-1r, because that way you can turn the resonance down. You've got the PH-1, you've got the 1r, but also have a 3-way selector switch like they have on the CE2 Waza, and mode 2 would give you the first mode of the PH-2, and mode 3 would give you the second mode of the PH-2 as well. So in this one pedal, you could encapsulate all 3 of its analog phaser pedals. I think that'd be a great idea. I'm not sure how well it'll sell. And at the end of the day, Boss is a business and they're concerned about sales. So they're not going to go putting out a pedal if they don't think it's going to sell. Personally, I would love to see Boss introduce a new phaser. I mean, they've only brought out 2 in the last 40 years, so I'm not holding my breath. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. You can pick up some merchandise from the Middle Age Gear Junkie store, which I've left links to in the description below. You can also join the Middle Age Gear Junkie Facebook page, and I've left a link to that in the description as well. Other than that, my name's Jason. Hope you have a wonderful day. See you later.